Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel. Give this video a like.
Check out our podcast also below in the description.
Justin Herbert named the starting quarterback for the season, or at least the permanent starting quarterback, whatever that means, John. In other words, Ryan Fitzpatrick got named the starter this week before Justin Herbert, but at least it happened finally.
Well, there was, I don't know if it's pending, but there was just potential litigation. I don't know, of a punctured lung. I've said from the start, man, I have a philosophy. When you take a quarterback in the NFL draft really high, let's just say top 10, but this whole crew of guys went top 6. So I'll say in single digits. If he's not, like, Trubisky was kind of an outlier, right? He was a one-year starter. Kyler Murray was a one-year starter, but really he had transferred behind Baker Mayfield, who, won the Heisman Trophy his last year. Kind of a unique circumstance. Justin Herbert, any guy like a Tua. Now, Tua was hurt, but Tua played a lot. The only reason Tua's not starting is because he was injured coming out of college. Justin Herbert, 4-year starter, correct? 4-year starter.
Correct. Yep.
Started as a redshirt freshman.
True freshman.
I thought it was
true freshman.
Listen, I've seen Tyrod Taylor. Like, I know what it looked like. And then we saw it against the Bengals. He's not any good. So ultimately, I get why Anthony Lynn pushed back in the sense of protecting his guy if it was for litigation. But from a football standpoint, maybe they were holding out hope that Herbert would have to go back to the bench. I thought that was fucking moronic. It doesn't make any sense. In 2020, not when the carryover, when you got legit wide receivers, you got a starting tight end, like you got good offensive personnel, an easy landing spot. To me, the moment, was it the first touchdown of the Tampa game that he threw like a 90-yard strike in the air to some no-name. It was like
while getting
unofficially, it was over. Like there was just that play alone, regardless what the score was after that point, and it was a dogfight. But even if it hadn't been, like I'm sorry, there was no going. They don't have a choice, guy. The talent to me was too immense. But I don't like how they got there personally. But they're there.
It doesn't. But what does it matter, right? We're here now. You and I differed before the year. I would not have started him from the jump, but I changed my mind after watching him play Kansas City. Could be 3-0. I mean, they've played in 4 one-score games. He's played in 3 of them. They've lost all 3. One thing really specifically with the Tampa game, and you and
Good stat. I mean, he's been in all these games.
Yes, we'll get to what he could be in terms of wins and losses in a second. But before that, I do want to say this. And again, after the Chiefs game, I was like, all right, I was wrong. Play the guy. I think part of what we saw in the Tampa game, the 2 deep bombs, but specifically the one that he hit, I think there's a chance that he is better in the NFL than he was at Oregon because his receivers are better in the NFL. I was talking to a guy named Jerry Allen, who's been the voice of the Ducks for decades, on Thursday. And I was like, what'd you think of Herbert? And he's like, well, you know what's crazy? As I was watching him, and he was talking to the radio analyst who used to play at Oregon too, a guy named Mike Jorgensen. He's like, we were watching him going like, why didn't they hit those deep balls when he was at Oregon? Maybe he's just learned to put more air onto the ball. And I said, yeah, or maybe his receivers are faster. But he's got NFL receivers. And you and I watch a lot of Oregon football, ton of Pac-12 football. They've got some guys, like they've recruited well. Micah Pittman, who was Michael Pittman Jr.'s younger brother's on their team, but he was beat up a little last year. But they don't have, Oregon does not have, and by and large didn't have when Herbert was the quarterback, like big NFL, Michael Pittman, Keenan Allen, 6'3", USC-looking wide receivers. And I wonder if just part of what's happening in Oregon with the Chargers is he's got better players around him. Now, he had a really good offensive line. They had a good run game, whatever. But his team is just – this offense is really talented.
Yeah, to me, they didn't have like what Pettis and John Ross were in college, like just NFL guys. Like, to me, I watched Oregon, and they just didn't have guys that you go, oh, they got 2 third-rounders and a 5th-rounder. Like, that's all. I'm not asking for Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Hunter Henry. Just some NFL guys. You could argue their running backs, for Oregon standpoint, they didn't have draftable running backs these last couple years. His skill guys at a program that you would say is pretty skill-friendly over our lifetime. Like, when I think the Oregon Ducks, Bellotti into Chip, even to Helfrich, I mean, NFL skill guys. Like, guys getting drafted at tight end, wide receiver, and definitely running back. And for whatever reason, they had probably their most talented quarterback of our lifetime, just in terms of NFL attributes.
Right.
And
Because
all the other
by the
spots,
way, you and I would put him ahead of Mariota coming out of college.
yeah, or Harrington or any of these guys just like he had clearly he's got immediately, I think most humans go, does he have one of the strongest arms in the NFL? Right? Just in terms of arm strength.
Yeah.
And the accuracy and everything needs to come. And he's thrown a couple bad picks. To me, the Tampa pick at the end of the game, little desperation mode, right? You're trying to push the envelope. So it was a little Phillip Rivers like. You just kind of got to let it
It did
rip.
feel very Chargers.
And he's going to have that. But my pushback from the start was I think you're underestimating the transition, and not you, but just in general and coaches in 2020, how easy it is.
Well, I probably was.
You can't hit the quarterback.
No,
you can't press the wide receivers. They play open. You have skill guys. And now we'll see. I think Mike Williams has been banged up. Eckler is hurt. But luckily, the great part about the NFL is, like at Oregon, it was a big deal if a starter went out. And wasn't it last year they had some injuries at wide receiver? Yeah. Like they had injury. Mike Williams is banged up.
Juwan Johnson,
these other guys
I guess
never
he's
heard
an NFL guy, the guy from Penn State, but he was hurt a lot last year. Okay, so let's look at the upcoming schedule, John. Like, what could they be? Could the Chargers fight their way back at 1-3, but they've lost in overtime to the Chiefs? They lost to Carolina. The hook and ladder or lateral, regardless, however you call it, could have been a game-winning touchdown. Tampa lost by 1, score 38-31. Now they play Monday Night Football coming up against the Saints. So that's a big game. It's on the road. After that, they play the Jets, the Dolphins, the Jags. They could conceivably be
then the Raiders, right?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say they could conceivably be 4-4 going into that Raider game if they're able to beat the Jets, Dolphins, and Jags. Let's just say if they were to lose to the Saints, but it actually looks on paper not as bad as maybe 1-3 feels.
Well, I think if you look at his 3 games, I'd go the Kansas City game and last week against Tampa. Like that's winning football, right? They lost to the best team in the league, Kansas City. And they lost to Tampa, which, as of recording this, they haven't played the Thursday night game. But I think it's fair to say that's a double-digit win team. If they played those games, they could beat the Saints. Let alone, I think they'll be favored in all those games that you listed going into the Raider game. If they play the Carolina game, I didn't think they played that well. Justin was off early. They could lose any game, right? They are, and this is the Chargers. They're a talented team. That like you go, they don't to me look like a 1-3 team if you watch them, but that's just part of their story.
You can't count on them to win any of these games.
No, but I do think he brings an element, and this is where I push from starting young guys because it snowballs. Even if you win or lose, if the guy plays well, I think he's got confidence. Because you'd say if he hadn't started and now Tyrod's hurt and he's got to make his first start in the Saints, you'd be like, oh, they're a 10-point underdog.
Yeah.
I look at him. Do you just think there's no chance they can go in and win this game?
I do think there's a chance they can win this game.
Because they can score. To me, their defense has to be more like the Chiefs than it is against like last week. Now, Tampa's more potent than Saints, right? Just in terms of Mike Evans was huge in that game. I don't give them, probably like I look at this like 65-35, but feel good about that 35, Saints going in this game.
Chargers are getting 7.5 points as of recording this. Yeah, but that's the problem historically with the Chargers is you look at them and say, yeah, they could win this game. But you also look at them and you can't assume they win any. Like for them to be 4-4, if that's what happens going into the Raider game in a month, it will not have been. So
he hasn't won an NFL game.
Hasn't won an NFL game.
But I think you ask anyone in the NFL, they would call it a raging success.
Yes.
Him in a vacuum, correct?
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah. The medical personnel would not say that, but the NFL, the GMs would.
Yeah. The Tyrod's defense attorneys,
the lawyers.
But you could argue this: the moment that Cincinnati Bengal game happened week 1, and
That's
clearly
right.
he was, I'm surely making plays in practice that just had to be eye-opening, right, with just his arm strength. It was probably inevitable because Tyrod wasn't good enough to overcome.
It's such a great
Would they
point.
have won these 3 games with Tyrod? No.
Part of the reason we're here is because Tyrod wasn't great in the game that he did start.
What I think is cool about this, though, there's a chance that they win 6 or 7 games, right? Because they just might lose a couple tight ones, continue to do though as the season goes on. And you are in such a better position. And this is always my pushback. Big picture, you go, well, fuck. We get Derwin James back. We get a top 12 draft pick. We get healthier. We get an off season. I think we're going to feel pretty good about this team. Maybe a new coach, just big picture, right?